Welcome into the latest edition of ESPN FC. I'm Dan Thomas, joined by Craig and Shaka. Later on, we are reflecting on what happened in the footballing world. But we start with something that reminds us that sport doesn't really matter. Kobe Bryant died today at the age of 41 in a helicopter crash in California. Of course, well known for being one of the best basketball stars ever. However, his love of sport went beyond that. Genuinely a big soccer fan. Tributes being paid today across Europe. AC Milan tweeting, "We have no words to express how shocked we are to hear of the tragic passing of one of the greatest sportsmen of all time. The Rossonero fan, Kobe Bryant, all our thoughts are with the families of those affected by this tragic accident. You'll forever be missed, Kobe." Andrea Pirlo tweeting, "You've been an example for our generation, RIP legend." So many other players tweeting similar sentiments. Meanwhile, FC Barcelona tweeted, "Shocked by the death of Kobe Bryant, an exemplary athlete both on and off the basketball court. Our most heartfelt condolences to his family and loved ones. Rest in peace." PSG, meanwhile, the club would like to express its deepest condolences to his family and friends, to the Lakers and the NBA family after the tragic passing of Kobe Bryant, RIP legend. Meanwhile, we saw Neymar score a penalty today in the second half of PSG against Lille. 2-4 held up to pay tribute to Kobe, of course, his number. Gab Marcotti with us. Gab, of course, much loved in the basketball community, but that love spread beyond that sport.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think of all the American basketball stars, there's probably not one who was as involved in football, lived it as emotionally as Kobe Bryant. And he wasn't just a fan. He obviously had roots on this side of the pond. His father, Joe Jellybean Bryant, played for 7 years in Italy. Kobe moved there when he was 6 years old and really spent his formative years from the age of 6 to 13 in various Italian cities. That's where he developed his love for AC Milan, which obviously continued throughout the years as he got older, as he went to Lower Merion High School in Philadelphia, and then later on into the NBA. And a lot of football stars are crossover basketball fans, but this is one that really went in the other direction and was very much genuine. He would spend his summers, a lot of his summers, back in Italy before becoming a professional, and went to watch friendly matches over the summer, and really lived the sport in a very genuine way.
Gab, he was no token supporter either. He genuinely loved the game.
Well, exactly. And I think that's kind of what sets it up. But it's almost like a weird dichotomy, right? Because you don't often get superstar athletes who are also fans. But, he was a fan of the sport before he became a famous athlete in a different sport. Obviously, he was a very good basketball player as a 7, 8, 10-year-old. But already then, he'd been bitten by the bug. He was a football fan. And that remained with him even as he went on to make basketball history and rewrite the record books.
Kobe Bryant was on his way to a travel basketball game with his daughter Gianna. Those aboard the helicopter also included another player and parent. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department say there were no survivors.
Yeah, Conte did not take this one well. He was spiky before the game as well when people pointed out, "Oh, look, you're going out and signing everybody." And he's like, "Well, it's not like I signed half of Real Madrid. Don't expect miracles." But the reality is, I think what he's most upset about is obviously Lautaro now facing a possible 2-match ban because of his attitude towards the referee. That would mean that he would miss not just the next game, but the Milan derby as well. And obviously angry because once again, it's points dropped and the fact that Inter dropped points after taking the lead. This is a team that, for whatever reason, in the last 20, 25 minutes, tends to lose it.
Yeah, what's going on, Gab? As you say, this is becoming a pattern, a worrying pattern.
Well, so the stock explanation that Conte gives is people need to work, and we need to play at high speed, we need to be intense, blah, 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 and I don't have the players to be intense for 90 minutes. he's probably right on that front. We have seen a drop of intensity, and we've also seen situations, I think, in the past when, because of injuries, you have to play the same guys over and over again, and they're not exactly spring chickens. So they would take it down a notch, and they would pay for it late in games. But you know what? There's more than one way to play football. There's more than one way to skin a cat. You can go out there and figure out a different way of playing where maybe, you kind of manage the game better and you don't have to run yourself into the ground. Because even Nainggolan's goal it was unlucky and there was a deflection and whatever else. I mean, that was a result of Stefano Sensi, who had run himself into the ground, not being able to get in position to go and defend Nainggolan.
The pre-match press conferences now for Conte should be, are you going to do a post-match press conference? Because we've seen it before. He's a and in some sense, the team's a mirror image of him. We saw it with Lautaro Martinez there, but he's punchy. The coach is punchy. That's the way they operate now. They're going to have to curtail that a bit if they want to go all the way, because you can't have people with bad discipline on a regular basis. The other reason he'd have been so frustrated was because at that point he was probably sure in his head that Juventus were going to pick up all 3 points in Naples, which they didn't. However, the recent form is a little worrying in terms of them going all the way, pushing Juventus right to the end. They cannot afford to keep dropping points, because I don't think Juventus will continue to do it.
But at the same time, you say that the team is a mirror image of Antonio Conte. I just find, and especially given his tetchiness, as Gab puts it, you're giving the players an excuse to be second best later on. Listen, I understand how you play and everything that goes into you dropping off in the last 20 or 25 minutes, but to Gab's point, you mentioned player signings, and all of a sudden, you kind of threw that as an excuse. We're really not that good. I mean, eventually that tells them with players' own mentality.
Meanwhile, Napoli against Juventus. We don't get to say this very much this season, but what a good week it's been for Napoli, Gab.
Well, and weirdly, of course, that has a knock-on effect, because it was a good week for Inter and Lazio. They would have never expected it, but they both gained a point on Juve. It was obviously a very, very emotional night for Naples. It's one of those nights when the San Paolo really comes alive, like very few other stadiums in the world. They were busy abusing Gonzalo Higuain before the game, and of course Maurizio Sarri. They were G'd up. Gattuso, when it comes to chest beating and motivating in these extreme situations, that's something he does very, very well. And they were tight. They were orderly at the back. Juventus created very little in the first half, and I think that's got to be a concern, because we've seen Juve play really well. They did it in midweek, and then it seems like they take one step forward and then they take another step back, because what they produced against Napoli simply isn't good enough. I mean, that's before you get into Szczesny spilling it and Insigne's great finish. These are games that you felt in the Allegri era they would somehow see out while maybe not playing great. The reality here, they didn't play great and they didn't get away with it. And I think that's what's different. This can't become a pattern for Juve. Otherwise, the Scudetto race is still very much on.
And I understand the chest beat, and I understand, Gattuso getting Napoli up for it, but this is the experienced Juve side. They should be used to that. But they just look completely flat today.
Well, they just had a day where they just did not play as well as they have been. And they had, as Gab said, Napoli were very well organised. They didn't leave too many gaps. They curtailed Juve to just a few chances, and they created chances themselves. So they themselves actually had one of their better games. And, it's not great if you're a Juventus fan, but I think almost everybody was sitting watching the results going, oh, well, that's it. If Juventus win, even at that point, 6 points or something, who's going to claw them back? But I think you can see that they're not at the side that they once were in terms of, right, they're going to go all the way through to the end of the season. They're not going to be dropping points. I just don't think Sarri's got them that convincing at the moment, and that's the hope for the others around them.
The thing for me is, and listen, we've been seeing that Juventus haven't been playing well for quite some time, but then we're getting results. And that was, again, evident today. I mean, you look at Juventus, simply poor. Too often, Bonucci just playing these long balls up from the back, which Napoli dealt with really easily. And I thought Napoli's football from back to front was a whole lot better. They were by far the better of the two teams. But from a Juventus perspective, Szczesny didn't have a whole lot to do until that Insigne shot that he made an absolute mess of. So in that respect, they were getting, Juventus were doing as we've seen Juventus do pretty much all season long. But they make a mistake, Napoli make it count. And from then, there was no on-switch for Juventus until Ronaldo later on.
There is always the on-switch for the Serie Awesome podcast. Even more reason to join it this week. Gab is off. A mystery guest. Very popular, but that's the way I see it. If then the FA do not respect it, then we cannot change. What do you say to that, Craig?
I can't argue with that because, you know, it's a classic case of the left arm not knowing what the right arm's doing here, because you have to be in unison. You've either got a winter break shut down across the board, or you don't. Now I know there are two different organisations involved here, but you got to find some common ground. And I know it's difficult. He's had the problem with the Carabao Cup. Now he's got this problem with the FA Cup, or it's not a problem, it seems. And that's why he was throwing all the big guns on at the end to try to get this job done. Some might say, well, he should have played a stronger 11 and got the job done there and then. That's a fine balancing act, but he's made a decision, and that's the way it's going to be.
I absolutely agree with Klopp here. And listen, he played his kids in the last round against Everton. I have no problem with him continuing to play his kids throughout the competition for all I care, regardless of how far they go. I think the bigger issue, and Craig's right to point this out, either the FA want a winter break or not. Every manager who comes into the league from other European leagues say that the Premier League needs a winter break and makes that call. And we are sceptical of it, as are the FA. Now all of a sudden you're saying, well, we have a winter break, respect it. But now, because of the replays, the games are being scheduled. This is less about, you know, Liverpool and the FA and just the FA getting this totally wrong.
A slightly side thing here is we talked about it last week. Is these replays, and I'm kind of a little conflicted. Last week I was like, nah. And the more I think about it, is we're just, if we say, right, no replays, you knock them out. It's almost just kowtowing to these big clubs, because I was reading the comments about Shrewsbury about what it's going to mean to them having a televised game today and a replay. That's going to be massive for the future of that club. The foundations, what they can do at the training ground, what they can do with all the logistics around the club. And sometimes you've got to sit back and say, do you know, there's more to cup competitions than just, you know, fudging it for the big boys at times.
Gab?
I mean, I think Craig hit the nail on the head there. If Shrewsbury are going to go and spend it on the foundation of the club, on logistics, on all this stuff, then I get the whole idea of the replay. The problem is, too many clubs in the past are like, oh, look, we have a lucrative replay at Old Trafford against Manchester United. Now we've got all this money coming in. Let's go and spend this all on wages. This is the issue with football. The single biggest cost for any club is wages. Live within your means. So if they're going to spend this money from the replay on stuff that benefits the club in the long term, on infrastructure, on a stand, whatever it is, I have no problem with it.
What about Klopp's decision, Gab, to just play the kids?
Look, I mean, he's done this before. He could have. They could have moved the League Cup semi-final against Aston Villa. They chose not to. So I think it's obvious what he thinks of these competitions and what he thinks the club's priorities are. And he's absolutely entitled to make those his priorities. I don't think the majority of Liverpool fans fault him for prioritizing the Premier League and the Champions League. And look, what this tells me, given their enormous league in the Premier League, is that he wants this winter break so that he can have a real run at the...
Decisions go against them.
What about if you have, like, goal line technology? If you have goal line technology at the Premier League ground, but not the lower league ground, you don't use that either?
I don't know.
You've got some rubbish referees out there as well. Not all the referees are at the same Premier League standard across the board, are they?
I'm a one
so you can have good referees and bad
I'm a
referees.
one for all kind of guy. Right? That's all I'm saying. You have it's either good enough for everybody or not at all.
Oh, vice versa. Gab?
All I'll say is that with VAR, Liverpool wouldn't be having a replay. We wouldn't have this discussion about Klopp disrespecting the FA Cup, allegedly, because that foul was outside the box. VAR would have deemed it outside the box, and they wouldn't have had the penalty, and it would have finished 2-1 to Liverpool.
Would you like to carry on this discussion or talk about what else happened in the FA Cup today?
No, well, I thought I would. Man United for me was in the circumstances of the problems that they've had and the criticism they've had. And I know, and Shaka touched on it, you know, Tranmere fighting a relegation battle, had a replay against Watford in midweek, which they won, great result. That takes it out of you. But on top of that, for United just to go and get the job done in the manner in which they did, as early as they did, was a real breather for Solskjaer sat in the technical area. Because, I mean, he's thinking, even at 1 or 2-0, right, we've got to kill this game because I cannot afford any more headaches. And he set his team up brilliantly to get the job done. And in the circumstances, Man United winning at Tranmere normally wouldn't be touching the... It wouldn't even be scraping the surface. However...
The manner of it.
And that's the thing. I think coming into this game, this is labelled as a no-win situation for Manchester United. But given the way that it panned out, the likes of Maguire and Jones on the score sheet, Lingard getting a much-needed goal, I think it went a whole lot better than anybody could have expected, or Solskjaer certainly would have hoped.
Well, the FA Cup continues tomorrow. One game remaining. It's on the south coast of England. Bournemouth taking on Arsenal. We'll, of course, be discussing that on the next edition of the show. So Bournemouth...